The first police siren hit my driveway before I even finished unloading the last box. Not down the street. Not next door, right in front of my house. Red and blue lights washing over a place I just bought. A place that was supposed to be quiet, private, and most importantly, not part of any HOA. I remember thinking this has to be a mistake. I had been in the house less than an hour. The officer stepped out, calm but alert, and asked me for ID. Then he asked me why I was trespassing. Trespassing on the home I legally owned. That's when I realized I hadn't just moved into a neighborhood, I'd moved into a power struggle. Let me rewind a bit. I bought this house because it was advertised as non-HOA. That wasn't a bonus. That was the deal breaker. I read the listing 3 times. I checked the county records. I even asked the seller directly. No HOA, no fees, no board, no rules about grass height or mailbox color. Just a quiet home on the edge of a development that did have an HOA, but my property was specifically excluded. At least that's what the paperwork said. Apparently the HOA didn't agree. The very first interaction I had wasn't a welcome wave. It was a woman marching up my driveway while I was still opening boxes, clipboard in hand. Sunglasses too big for her face. That looked like she'd already decided I was a problem. She didn't introduce herself. She just said, "You need to stop what you're doing." I asked her who she was. She said she was with the HOA and that I needed approval before moving in. I told her calmly that my home wasn't part of the HOA. She smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind that says, "We'll see about that." She said all homes on this street answer to us. I told her she was wrong. That's when her tone changed. She started talking about fines, about violation, about how the board could make things difficult. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "Please leave my property." She stared at me for a long second, then said, "I'll be back." And she was. With the police. Before I go any further, if you like real stories where entitled HOAs pick the wrong house and reality hits hard, go ahead and like the video and subscribe to Karen Stories Daily. This one starts messy, but trust me, the ending is worth it. Back to the driveway. The officer asked me for proof of ownership. I handed him the closing documents. He reviewed them carefully. He didn't rush. He didn't accuse. He just listened. Meanwhile, Karen stood behind him, arms crossed, nodding like she was supervising the situation. She told the officer I was refusing to follow HOA rules and that I had illegally occupied the property. I watched the officer's eyebrows knit together. He asked her which HOA governed my address. She named it confidently. He asked for documentation. She said they had it. He asked to see it. She said it was on file. That was the first crack. The officer told her he couldn't remove someone from a property without clear evidence of trespassing. She snapped back that the HOA overruled individual deeds. That's when the officer turned to me and said, "Sir, do you mind if I make a call to verify this with the county?" I said, "Please do." Karen's face tightened. While we waited, she leaned toward me and whispered that this would all be much easier if I just cooperated. If I paid the fees, if I followed the rules like everyone else. I told her quietly that threatening someone on their own property was a bad idea. She laughed. The call came back fast. The officer stepped away, listened, nodded, and came back with a very different expression. He told Karen the county confirmed my lot was not part of the HOA. Never had been. Never would be unless I voluntarily opted in. Karen argued, loudly. She said the county records were outdated. She said the development agreement overrode individual deeds. She said she knew the board president personally. The officer told her to step back. He then turned to me and apologized. Karen didn't like that. She accused the officer of siding with me. She accused me of lying. She accused both of us of conspiring against the neighborhood. And then she said something that changed everything. She said, "Fine, we'll handle this legally." At the time, I thought that meant letters, lawyers, maybe harassment. I didn't realize she meant escalation. Because what she did next forced me to push back in a way she never expected. The first letter showed up 2 days later. Thick envelope. official-looking seal. It claimed I was in violation of HOA covenants and owed immediate fines for unauthorized occupancy, unapproved exterior changes, and failure to submit HOA registration paperwork. I laughed at first, because it was ridiculous. Then I realized that wasn't the point. The point was pressure. They were betting I'd panic. I didn't. Instead, I made copies of everything. The letter, the envelope, the return address. Then I checked county records again, just to be sure. Same answer as before. My property line stopped exactly where the HOA's authority ended. Clean, clear. Recorded decades ago. That didn't stop the letters. Over the next week, they kept coming. Each one more aggressive than the last. Fines doubled. Deadlines shortened. Threats escalated from liens to foreclosure, language that sounded scary if you didn't know how hollow it was. They even posted a violation notice on my front door like I was some delinquent renter. Neighbors started watching, some curious, some uncomfortable, a few sympathetic but afraid to say anything out loud. HOA culture does that. People learn fast that silence is safer than standing out. Then came the inspection. I came home from work and found two people walking my yard with clipboards, measuring tape out. One of them was Karen. She didn't ask permission. She didn't knock. She just acted like she owned the place. I told them to leave. Karen said they were conducting an HOA compliance check. I told her again that she was trespassing. She smiled and said, "We'll see what the board says." That night I sent a certified letter. 1 page, calm language, clear boundaries. I stated that my property was not subject to their HOA, that any further contact would be considered harassment, and that unauthorized entry would be documented. I also CC'd the county assessor. The response wasn't an apology. It was a notice that the HOA had updated its records and now considered my property disputed territory. That's when I realized this wasn't about confusion. It was about control. They assumed I'd fold before they did. The next morning, a police cruiser pulled up again. Different officers this time, same story from the HOA. Trespassing, refusal to comply, disorderly conduct. The officers were polite, but clearly annoyed that they'd been dragged into a civil dispute. I showed them the same paperwork. They took notes. One of them asked who kept calling this in. I told him the HOA. He nodded slowly. Karen arrived halfway through the conversation, breathless and confident, like she was sure this time would go her way. She interrupted the officer mid-sentence and demanded they remove the occupant. That word again. Occupant. The officer told her to step back and let him finish. He explained, slowly, that property disputes like this didn't justify police removal without a court order. He told her that repeated false calls could become an issue. Her confidence cracked, just a little. After they left, I didn't celebrate. I prepared. I requested public records, HOA maps, original development filings, amendments. I learned more about that neighborhood's legal history in 3 days than most board members ever bothered to know. And the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. The HOA had tried this before. Not with police, not this aggressively, but they'd slowly absorbed nearby lots over the years by intimidation. People paid fees just to make the noise stop. No one had ever pushed back all the way. Until now, the final straw came when they sent a notice claiming they'd placed a lien on my property. That was a lie. A big one. And lying on legal documents is where the game changes. I called a real estate attorney, not to threaten, to confirm. He laughed when he saw the paperwork. Then he stopped laughing and said, "They've made a serious mistake." That's when I knew this was no longer about defending my home. It was about ending this behavior for good, because what I did next didn't just shut them up. It flipped the entire power structure. The attorney didn't waste time. He asked one question that stuck with me. "Do you want this to stop, or do you want it to never happen again?" I told him the truth. I was done being patient. I wanted it finished. Within 48 hours, the HOA received a formal demand letter. Not emotional, not threatening, just facts. It outlined my deed, the county maps, the development boundaries, and every documented instance of harassment, trespass, and false reporting. It also included copies of the police call logs, dates, times, names. That part mattered more than they realized. Then came the part that made them panic. The letter informed them that by issuing false violation notices, claiming a lien that didn't exist, and repeatedly summoning law enforcement under false pretenses, they had exposed themselves to serious civil liability, not just the HOA as an entity. Individual board members. Karen's name was listed first. 2 days later, the tone changed completely. I got a voicemail. Not angry, not confident, careful. Karen said there had been a misunderstanding and that the HOA wanted to resolve things amicably. She asked if we could meet. I didn't call her back. I let the attorney handle it. The HOA's lawyer reached out instead. Different energy, apologetic without admitting fault. He said the HOA would immediately cease all enforcement actions related to my property. They would retract every notice. They would notify the police department that the calls were made in error. They would issue a written acknowledgement that my property was not and never had been under their authority. I agreed on one condition. That acknowledgement had to be sent to every homeowner in the neighborhood. That's when the real fallout started. The email went out on a Friday afternoon. By Saturday morning, my phone was buzzing with messages from neighbors, some confused, some furious, some relieved. People who had been paying fees for years suddenly wanted to know how many of those rules were actually enforceable. Turns out, my lot wasn't the only one on the edge of their authority. The HOA held an emergency meeting, then another, then another. Karen didn't attend the last one. She resigned the following week, citing personal reasons. The board president stepped down shortly after. Their lawyer advised them to suspend enforcement until a full audit could be completed. That audit uncovered things they never wanted found: improper liens, overreach, selective enforcement, patterns of intimidation that looked a lot like what they'd tried with me. The police department followed up too. The officer who'd first responded called to let me know they'd flagged the HOA address. Future calls would be treated differently, carefully, skeptically. The notices stopped. The letters stopped. The drive-bys stopped. For the first time since I moved in, the house felt like home. A few weeks later, a neighbor stopped me while I was checking the mail. She thanked me, said she'd been too scared to question the HOA before. Said watching someone stand their ground changed things. That's the part people don't talk about enough. Standing up isn't just about you. It resets expectations. Life went quiet after that. The good kind of quiet. No clipboards, no sirens, no fake authority showing up uninvited. Just a house, a yard, and the freedom I paid for. If you've ever dealt with an HOA that forgot its limits, or someone who thought power came from a title instead of the law, drop a comment and share your story. Someone else reading it might need the reminder that paperwork matters and intimidation only works if you let it. And if you want more real stories where entitlement runs straight into reality, make sure you're subscribed to Karen Stories Daily. Share this with someone who's fighting the same battle, and remember, sometimes the strongest move is simply knowing your rights and refusing to back down.